the Göbekli Tepe builders. For decades, archaeologists insisted that civilization began only after farming, settlement, and writing. Then, Göbekli Tepe shattered that timeline like glass. Buried beneath layers of deliberate earth, atop a lonely hill in southeastern Turkey, researchers found megalithic stone circles, older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older even than agriculture itself. But what almost no documentary mentions is the quiet, uncomfortable truth whispered behind closed doors. These structures were not the work of wandering hunter-gatherers. They belonged to a civilization that officially should not exist, a civilization far more advanced than the archaeological narrative allows. The pillars stand more than 16 feet tall, each weighing tons, carved with precision reliefs of animals that never lived in that region. Some stones show marks from tools harder than anything believed available at the time. The level of geometry, engineering, and astronomical alignment displayed here suggests a society with specialized labor, shared knowledge, and long-term cultural continuity, something you cannot have without a structured civilization. Yet the official records refuse to call them one, because acknowledging a lost civilization older than 10,000 BC would overturn every chronological pillar of human history. What made this discovery even more dangerous was the dating. When initial radiocarbon tests revealed Göbekli Tepe to be over 11,600 years old, the exact date of the Younger Dryas catastrophe, a sudden global freeze, funding mysteriously dried up. Several research teams reported being redirected, replaced, or sidelined. One German archaeologist publicly complained that certain findings were not permitted to be interpreted. He died shortly after, and multiple unpublished papers vanished from university archives. Witnesses from early digs reported subterranean chambers filled with obsidian tools, polished stone vessels, and carvings depicting constellations out of sequence with the sky of 10,000 BC. These details quietly disappeared from later publications. One local worker claimed that a chamber containing human remains arranged deliberately around a circular basin was sealed off on orders from above. What those remains represented and why testing was blocked remains unspoken. The most suspicious element is the site's burial. Unlike ruins lost naturally to erosion, Göbekli Tepe was intentionally entombed under hundreds of tons of soil. Someone tried to hide it completely. Someone invested monumental effort to erase every trace of the builders. That level of concealment suggests fear, a civilization so destabilizing to the future narrative that even their own descendants sought to bury their memory. What humanity lost when Göbekli Tepe was erased is immeasurable. The blueprint for the world's first spiritual complexes, the origins of scientific architecture, a clear window into a society that survived a global cataclysm and tried to pass on their knowledge, only to be silenced by time, by disaster, and possibly by human hands. If this is what survived, imagine what was destroyed. The Sundaland Maritime Empire. Long before Egypt, long before Sumer, when most of the world was still locked in the icy grip of the last ice age, a vast stretch of land connected Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Today it lies drowned beneath the Indian Ocean. But in ancient legends, Malay, Javanese, Cambodian, Aboriginal, even Polynesian, this landmass was once the heart of an advanced maritime civilization, the Sundaland Empire. It was a society that mastered ocean travel at a time when mainstream history insists no one could sail beyond sight of land. Yet their fingerprints are faintly visible across the Pacific, on remote islands thousands of kilometers apart, forming a trail of erased history. When sea levels were 120 meters lower, Sundaland was not a chain of islands, but a continent-sized tropical paradise. Satellite bathymetry has revealed the outlines of what appear to be drowned river systems, harbors, and geometric structures, yet these findings are habitually dismissed as natural formations. Marine archaeologists who attempted dives in the 1990s reported strange stone patterns and terraces beneath the Java Sea, only to see their research funding suddenly cut. One even claimed his cameras were confiscated after capturing footage of what looked like a stepped platform 5 stories tall. What makes Sundaland so threatening to the official narrative is its timing. This landmass flooded rapidly between 12,000 and 8,600 years ago. The exact period global myths describe a great deluge. If an advanced coastal civilization existed there, rising seas would have wiped them out almost overnight, leaving their survivors to scatter across Asia and the Pacific. This dispersal could explain the sudden appearance of boat building, agriculture, and unique languages across vast distances. But acknowledging this would mean accepting that seafaring technology is far older than textbooks allow. Evidence that did surface was quickly neutralized. In the 19th century, British explorers in Borneo discovered carved stone blocks that matched megalithic patterns in Polynesia. Those stones disappeared en route to London. A controversial 1977 Indonesian report described submerged structures resembling port walls. Within months, the lead scientist was reassigned and the report withdrawn. Even today, permits to explore the deeper Java Sea are notoriously difficult to obtain. The implications were enormous. If Sundaland mastered long-distance navigation, they could have connected cultures across oceans millennia before history officially began. This threatens the idea that civilization began in the Middle East. It threatens national narratives. It threatens academic careers built on old timelines. And so the Sundaland Empire became a dangerous idea. Too old, too advanced, too interconnected. What humanity lost is unimaginable. Early maps of the Pacific, methods of monsoon navigation, knowledge of rising seas, and a cultural network stretching across half the world. Sundaland was a civilization that rose with the ocean and was erased by it. But echoes of their world still linger in myths, languages, and the silence of the drowned continent beneath the waves. The Sahara Green Kingdom. Today, the Sahara is a wasteland. 3.6 million square miles of burning dunes and empty silence. But beneath that silence lies one of the greatest erasures in human history. 12,000 years ago, the Sahara was not a desert at all. It was a vast green biome filled with rivers, lakes, forests, and fertile plains. And at the heart of this forgotten paradise existed a kingdom so old, so organized, and so technologically skilled that its disappearance still unsettles researchers who dare to speak about it. This was the Sahara Green Kingdom, a civilization erased by climate, politics, and deliberate neglect. When satellite LiDAR scans were first conducted in the early 2000s, they revealed shocking anomalies: buried riverbeds the size of the Nile, rectangular foundations stretching for kilometers, and circular structures eerily similar to fortified settlement patterns in prehistoric Europe. These were not natural formations. They showed intentional design, but within months, the scans were classified by military authorities, citing regional security concerns. Universities were denied access to the original data. Only low-resolution public images remain, stripped of their most compelling details. Archaeologists who worked in the Central Sahara during the 1960s uncovered something even more disturbing: polished stone blocks, arranged in precise geometric alignments, tools made from composite materials, and artwork depicting domesticated cattle thousands of years earlier than mainstream chronology permits. But after political shifts across North Africa, several dig sites were placed off-limits. Warehouses storing artifacts were accidentally burned. Reports were sealed or rewritten. What little survived was quietly dismissed as misdated or misunderstood. The kingdom's reach likely extended from modern-day Algeria deep into Chad and Niger. Early explorers described massive stone enclosures half buried in sand, with walls so perfectly cut that they fit together without mortar. One French geologist in 1933 reported finding a 40-mile-long canal system, straight, leveled, engineered. His official notes vanished, and his memoir was pulled from print shortly after its release. The real threat posed by the Sahara Green Kingdom is chronological. If a complex civilization existed in North Africa before 8000 BC, it would mean Egypt was not the beginning, but the inheritance. It would mean that Africa held an advanced culture whose innovations flowed north into the Nile Valley after the desertification event around 5500 BC. And that narrative is fiercely resisted because it rewrites not just African history, but the foundations of global civilization. The kingdom did not fall through war or invasion. It died when the rains stopped. The lakes evaporated. The forests receded. The desert advanced year after year, until cities, canals, and monuments were swallowed whole. Survivors likely fled east toward the Nile and west toward the Atlantic coast, taking fragments of their knowledge with them. What humanity lost is a library written in stone, methods of water engineering, early metallurgy, and a blueprint for sustainable life in extreme environments. Everything that could have guided our modern world vanished under sand, and someone somewhere seems determined to keep it buried. The Black Sea Deluge Civilization. At the edge of Eastern Europe lies a sea that was once a freshwater lake, surrounded by fertile plains and thriving settlements. But around 5,600 BC, everything changed. A catastrophic flood, one of the largest in human prehistory, burst through the Bosporus Strait and transformed the lake into the Black Sea we know today. For decades, it was considered a simple geological event, but the evidence now suggests something far more devastating. An advanced pre-flood civilization existed around that lake, and the deluge erased it so thoroughly that only fragments remain, whispered in myths of a world drowned in a single day. Divers exploring the Black Sea shelf in the late 1990s discovered collapsed wooden structures preserved under anoxic water. The wood was so well preserved it looked freshly cut. Early reports described straight walls, door frames, and geometric flooring that suggested organized construction. But as soon as the findings reached the media, government agencies intervened. Funding was withdrawn. Several researchers left the project abruptly, some citing pressure from institutions that preferred the narrative remain geological, not cultural. Later expeditions, private ones, reported even more shocking details. Stone anchors shaped like those used by Mediterranean sailors millennia later, pottery identical to early Anatolian designs, and what looked like outlines of entire settlements extending for miles. Yet none of these discoveries were published in peer-reviewed journals. Some of the photographs allegedly taken have never resurfaced. One diver claimed that his team was confronted by naval vessels and ordered to stop documenting the site. Why the suppression? Because if the Black Sea once hosted a flourishing civilization, it forces a complete rewrite of European prehistory. It would imply that agricultural, architectural, and navigational knowledge spread outward from this drowned center into the Balkans, the Caucasus, and the Middle East after the flood. The sudden appearance of advanced farming communities across Europe around 5,500 BC suddenly becomes less mysterious and much more politically inconvenient. The possibility of a proto-urban society drowned in a single catastrophic event also threatens long-standing religious and cultural timelines. Stories of global floods from Mesopotamia, Anatolia, Greece, and even Northern Europe suddenly converge into a historical event rather than mythological metaphor. That kind of convergence terrifies institutions that rely on separating myth from history. Witness accounts from early explorations describe something still more unsettling: inscriptions carved into stone slabs at depths that make no sense unless they predate the flood. Symbols with no known linguistic comparison, arranged in sequences that suggest proto-writing. These claims were swiftly dismissed as misinterpretations, though the slabs in question have since vanished into private collections, or worse. When the floodwaters surged in from the Mediterranean, they rose with the force of a waterfall 200 times more powerful than Niagara. In weeks, perhaps days, an entire world drowned. Homes, temples, workshops, early ports, all swallowed by the newborn sea. Survivors would have fled up the surrounding hills, carrying only fragments of their culture. The Caspian steppe star markers. North of the Caspian Sea, across the windswept plains of Kazakhstan and southern Russia, lies a region that has always seemed barren and empty. But aerial surveys and satellite imaging have revealed a truth that threatens to rewrite not just Eurasian history, but the origins of astronomy itself. Scattered across these desolate steppes are hundreds of enormous geometric formations, perfect circles, crosses, grids, and spirals, so large they can only be seen from the sky. Western researchers refer to them quietly as the steppe geoglyphs. But within academic circles, a more troubling name whispers the Caspian steppe star markers. Because these structures form patterns too precise, too aligned, and too consistent to be random. They appear to map the heavens thousands of years before recorded astronomy supposedly began. When the first images emerged in 2007, researchers were stunned. Some figures stretched over 400 feet, constructed from earth, stone, and packed clay. Their mathematical symmetry rivaled the Nazca lines, yet they were far older, some estimates placing them between 10,000 and 12,000 years old. But almost immediately, the narrative shifted. Russian authorities denied access to several sites, declaring them military zones. The universities that tried to investigate found their permits revoked. One geologist who published preliminary data later retracted his own paper without explanation. The reasons became clear. These geoglyphs were not the work of nomadic herders. They were signatures of an advanced, organized society that officially should not exist. Local legends speak of sky watchers who measured seasons, tracked celestial cycles, and built earthworks to mirror the constellations. Some formations align precisely with the solstices and equinoxes, their angles matching stellar positions from millennia earlier. But the moment these alignments were mentioned publicly, they were dismissed as coincidence. When a team attempted to excavate beneath one of the largest structures, they reportedly discovered charcoal layers and stone tools unlike any known culture in the region. Their research was halted. Samples disappeared from the laboratory. One archaeologist involved claimed, before resigning, that they had uncovered evidence of an early scientific class. Why would such a discovery be threatening? Because the accepted timeline places advanced astronomy in Babylon and Egypt, not the steppes of Central Asia. Admitting an earlier scientific civilization would disrupt national histories across the region. It would undermine academic hierarchies built on assigning technological firsts to specific cultures, and it would force historians to confront the uncomfortable truth that humanity has risen to scientific heights and fallen far more times than we admit. The final blow came when independent researchers used the surviving geoglyph data to reconstruct the larger pattern. Many formations appeared to map the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle so complex it requires centuries of accumulated observation. This implied continuity, planning, knowledge passed across generations. In other words, civilization. What humanity lost when the star markers vanished was the world's earliest astronomical school, a culture that understood the heavens with a precision we only regained thousands of years later. Their cities, their instruments, their knowledge, all erased by time, politics, and the quiet machinery of suppression. The Indus pre-urban culture. The Indus Valley Civilization, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, is often described as one of the earliest great urban societies. But the truth is far older, far deeper, and far more unsettling. Beneath the cities we know, beneath layers of river silt and abandoned streets, lie the ruins of a civilization that predates them by thousands of years. It is rarely mentioned in textbooks, barely acknowledged in academic journals, and almost never discussed publicly. Yet the signs are undeniable. The Indus pre-urban culture was not just older than Harappa, it may have been the blueprint that Harappa inherited. The first cracks in the official narrative appeared in the 1960s, when archaeologists drilling beneath Mohenjo-Daro found fired bricks at depths that should not have contained human habitation at all. The deeper they dug, the more advanced the structures became. Not cruder, not simpler, more precise. Bricks were uniform, drainage systems more elaborate. Pottery fragments showed intricate patterns predating the established timeline by at least 2,000 years. Instead of rewriting the history books, the findings were quietly buried, literally and academically. In the 1980s, Indian researchers conducting deep core drills along the ancient Saraswati riverbed found evidence of urban planning older than the river's collapse. Wide roads aligned to cardinal directions, foundations of what appeared to be granaries, and a complex water management system far beyond the capabilities of supposed pre-urban societies. But the moment the results threatened the standardized Hindu, Pakistani, and Western archaeological frameworks, funding evaporated. The riverbed excavations were halted, reports were classified under sensitive cultural material. What emerged from later independent digs was even more shocking. Beneath Harappa, several layers of settlement showed signs of catastrophic destruction, burn marks, vitrified brick, and sudden abandonment, followed by long periods of rebuilding. Something catastrophic had happened here, repeatedly, as if a great civilization rose, fell, and rose again. But the earliest layers showed the highest craftsmanship, a pattern that defies the narrative of linear progress. One private research team claimed to have found evidence of metal smelting thousands of years earlier than permitted by mainstream chronology. Their samples, too, allegedly disappeared. The Andes lithic engineers. High in the mountains of Peru and Bolivia, above the tree line where air thins and storms carve the earth, lie ruins that should not exist. Walls of stone so perfectly joined that not even a razor blade can slide between them. Blocks weighing 50, 80, even 120 tons stacked with surgical precision. Polygonal geometry that defies modern replication. These structures at Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, Pumapunku are attributed to the Inca. But the Inca themselves said otherwise. They claimed the stonework was ancient before they arrived. Built by an unknown people, the true masters of stone, the Andes lithic engineers. Mainstream archaeology insists these structures were crafted with simple stone tools, yet even today, stonemasons stare in disbelief at the interlocking, earthquake-resistant designs that modern equipment struggles to reproduce. The more closely you examine the ruins, the more contradictions appear. At Pumapunku, stone blocks have perfectly drilled holes, grooves with uniform depth, and machine-like symmetry found nowhere else in the ancient world. Geologists quietly acknowledge that some surfaces show signs of high-temperature shaping, possibly heat-assisted stone softening, techniques supposedly impossible before the industrial age. In the 1920s, German researcher Arthur Poznański argued that the oldest layers of Tiwanaku were over 15,000 years old based on stellar alignments. His findings were ridiculed, then ignored, then quietly locked away. When later researchers attempted to revisit his astronomical analysis, they were denied permits to conduct nighttime surveys. Even today, certain portions of Tiwanaku remain off-limits to independent researchers. Because if the oldest stonework predates the Inca by millennia, it suggests a civilization that rose long before the accepted beginning of South American history. In 1997, Peruvian archaeologists uncovered finely cut stone tunnels beneath Sacsayhuaman, tunnels that descended far deeper than the Inca construction layers. The discovery was announced briefly, then abruptly withdrawn. Teams were reassigned, the tunnels sealed. Whistleblowers inside the project claimed that the lower chambers contained artifacts unlike anything attributed to known Andean cultures, including metal alloys that did not match historical metallurgy. Their claims were never investigated. The forgotten Nile Delta culture. Before the rise of the dynastic Egyptians, before the first pharaohs, before hieroglyphs, before the pyramids, there existed a civilization in the Nile Delta so old and so sophisticated that even early Egyptologists whispered about it in private letters. But this culture left behind something Egypt could not tolerate, a past older than itself. And so the forgotten Nile Delta culture was gradually suffocated under politics, nationalism, and a carefully curated archaeological narrative. The Delta is notoriously difficult to excavate. The annual Nile floods buried layer upon layer of ancient settlements beneath meters of silt. But in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers uncovered artifacts from the Delta that should not exist in the pre-dynastic timeline. Finely carved stone bowls with machine-like symmetry, copper tools of purity and hardness, far beyond what the era supposedly allowed, and basalt jars whose interiors were so smooth they appeared lathe-made. Some of these artifacts entered museums quietly, labeled cautiously as unattributed, while others vanished into private collections. One of the most troubling discoveries occurred in the 1930s when excavators near Tanis unearthed structures of megalithic stonework composed of blocks far larger than anything attributed to the earliest Egyptians. The stones showed erosion patterns consistent with construction thousands of years before the desertification of North Africa. Yet when the team tried to publish their findings, the lead archaeologist was pressured to revise the dating. Shortly after, the site was declared restricted and reclassified as religious ruins. All further investigation was halted. More evidence emerged from the Fayum Depression, where subterranean chambers filled with intricately carved artifacts were discovered beneath later strata. One chamber contained a stone vessel whose inner curvature matched the precision of modern engineering. Engineers consulted during the 1950s claimed the level of craftsmanship suggested advanced lathe technology, or a method entirely unknown. The response from academic institutions was swift. The artifacts were reclassified as ritual objects and moved out of public display. The greatest threat to the established Egyptian narrative came from what researchers called protoglyphs, symbols etched into stone blocks found deep beneath the delta mud. These symbols resembled early hieroglyphs, but were more abstract, more mathematical, and far older than the earliest written Egyptian. The Doggerland Stone Network. Today, the North Sea appears empty, cold, gray, turbulent, but beneath those waves lies a drowned world once connecting Britain to mainland Europe. This lost landscape is known as Doggerland, a vast stretch of fertile plains, forests, and river systems that thrived during the Mesolithic period. Officially, it was home to small nomadic tribes. Unofficially, according to suppressed research, classified sonar scans, and fishermen's forbidden trophies, it contains something far more remarkable: a network of megalithic structures older than Stonehenge, a civilization the world was never meant to remember. The first hints emerged in the 1930s, when trawlers began pulling up antler tools, polished stone axes, and worked timber far too advanced for the supposed timeline. But the breakthrough came in the early 2000s, when oil and gas companies mapped the seabed using high-resolution sonar. The scans revealed geometric stone patterns, long linear alignments, and circular formations buried beneath sediment, structures resembling causeways, enclosures, and large standing stones. Some formations stretched for kilometers. The public never saw these scans. They were classified under corporate confidentiality and security concerns. A marine archaeologist who collaborated briefly with an energy corporation later claimed that one site showed a concentric stone ring nearly twice the diameter of Stonehenge. He described upright pillars lying toppled in the same direction, as if destroyed by a massive tidal surge. But after speaking publicly, he was removed from the project and his research notes confiscated. None of the images he described have ever resurfaced. What makes the Doggerland Stone Network so threatening is not only its age, potentially older than 8000 BC, but its sophistication. If the alignments match lunar and solar cycles, as early analyses suggested, then people living in Doggerland possessed astronomical knowledge thousands of years earlier than textbooks allow. Even more unsettling, the structures appear interconnected, forming a symbolic landscape that may have guided seasonal migrations, rituals, or early scientific observations. The flood that ended Doggerland was cataclysmic. Around 6200 BC, a massive undersea landslide triggered waves estimated at 20 meters high. Within days or weeks, the heart of Doggerland drowned. Survivors fled to England, Scotland, Denmark, and the Low Countries, bringing with them myths of a world swallowed by the sea. These myths echo eerily across northern Europe, tales of sunken kingdoms, drowned temples, and stone rings beneath the waves. Attempts to investigate Doggerland independently have faced relentless barriers. Governments claim the seabed is too dangerous to explore. Corporations refuse to release mapping data. Academic institutions dismiss the structures as geological coincidences, even when stone tools are found embedded within them. The Yonaguni Coastal Kingdom. Off the coast of Japan's Ryukyu Islands, beneath 100 feet of turquoise water, lies one of the most controversial archaeological sites on Earth. Massive terraced platforms, geometric steps, perfectly straight walls, and megalithic blocks shaped with uncanny precision stretch across the seafloor. Officially, it is all dismissed as natural erosion. Unofficially, divers, geologists, and naval observers know a different truth. These ruins belonged to a forgotten civilization far older than Japan itself, a kingdom that thrived when sea levels were lower and coastal cities lined the Pacific Rim, a kingdom violently erased when rising oceans swallowed its world, the Yonaguni coastal kingdom. When the structure was first discovered in 1986, divers described terraces nearly 200 meters long, with steps rising in perfect increments. Some walls formed right angles sharper than any natural formation could produce. Others contained channels that looked engineered to carry water. On one massive block, a large square pillar stood upright like a watchtower. Another area resembled a stadium with seating carved into the bedrock. The deeper researchers swam, the more the site resembled a drowned city. Not a geological anomaly, but pressure to silence the discovery came shockingly fast. Universities refused to fund formal excavations. Government agencies issued warnings to stop calling the site man-made. Geologists who argued the formations were artificial found themselves removed from research committees. A leading marine archaeologist publicly stated that existing political frameworks cannot accommodate Yonaguni as a cultural site. His comments vanished from official transcripts within days. Divers unaffiliated with academia revealed even more astonishing details. One reported narrow tunnels reinforced with uniform stone slabs. Another described symbols etched into a vertical wall, similar to early Proto-Japanese markings. Yet each time new evidence emerged, authorities insisted on geological explanations. The message was clear. This site could not be allowed to rewrite Asian prehistory, because if Yonaguni is real, if it is the remains of an ancient coastal kingdom, its age would fall between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago, before the end of the last ice age. That alone shatters the academic narrative, suggesting that Japan's earliest inhabitants built monumental architecture long before the Jomon period. Worse still, it implies that advanced civilizations once lined coastlines across the entire Pacific, forming a network researchers have long suspected but dared not describe openly. The most disturbing evidence came from naval sonar mapping done during the 1990s. Anonymous sources claimed the maps revealed straight underwater roads, leading away from the main structure with sidewalls intact. Some even spoke of smaller stepped complexes deeper offshore, too deep to have been exposed any time after 10,000 BC. These sonar images have never been released to the public.